learned very quickly was the teams that were winning weren't necessarily teaching good baseball. They were teaching the kids how to take advantage of the situation that was presented at that time to create runs and get wins. So we became a very good 8U team in terms of our win-loss record, but maybe not teaching the best baseball. But
when you step out on that field, everyone is equal. But do you want to go out there like every other player, like every other team? Or do you want to stand up this day to make this day count? Make it count.
All right, what's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 1 of the SquadCast. And this is literally the first of its kind. We are starting a podcast called the SquadCast that is 100% focused on youth sports, being a coach, being a leader, being a parent, and even being a player, because we will once a month have players joining us as well to get just different perspectives, different viewpoints, different expertise on what it's like to both coach and be a parent and just everything youth sports related. And really kind of the principle of why the gentleman that's joining me tonight, why we started our organization, was legitimately just teaching life skills through youth sports. And so that's kind of what this podcast is about. It's where we're going to take it, which is exactly why for the first episode, I had to have my partner in crime, Eric Steinbach, join me and kind of deliver our origin story of how our organization began, why we started it, and where we are going in the future. So, Eric, welcome to the SquadCast, episode 1, my man.
That's right, man. What's up, Mike? This is going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to this.
It's going to be a blast, man. We have so many awesome people lined up in the future too, from professional athletes to D1 coaches to just everyday moms and dads, all the way to some parenting experts who are going to give us their perspective on emotional learning and how sports and the things that we do as parents and coaches really play into that and their future development and all sorts of fun stuff. And hopefully we will bring the listeners and watchers of this a lot of value through these conversations. But this episode is really just to set the tone, right? I think to give an origin story of kind of how we came to be, me and you, as far as friends, and then obviously leading us to where we are today with a growing travel baseball organization, and really what led us to kind of start this podcast in the beginning. So, I mean, I think we first met, I don't even know what year it was, but it had to be, Ethan was like 2 or 3. Right.
I was going to say, I think it was 2014.
Yeah. 9 years ago. It's crazy.
It's been a long time now.
It doesn't seem like that long, but yeah, I mean, I remember
it was 5 minutes.
I remember Ethan walking out there. He was like a foot tall, tiny little thing. Excuse me, coming out there, but he looked like a player. I knew I had a future player on my hands from the first second, because he was all about business. He came out there ready to hit the ball. But I mean, I think so. Going back, obviously,
that was T-ball days.
That was T-ball. That was almost T-ball, because I think the T was taller than Ethan was, and most of our kids.
That's right.
Right. So we had to like cut the T down and only use like the actual base of the T. So it was, at the height. And then to take that from where they are now to playing 11U travel baseball and everything in between has been an interesting ride. And I think kind of how we got here is kind of important, right? And I think this is a journey that a lot of parents go through. It's a journey that a lot of coaches go through, right? Where you're doing the rec baseball thing or the rec sports thing, the non-competitive thing, and you're letting your kid taste it and see if they actually like it. And, they're usually playing multiple sports and trying to figure out what that path for them is going to be. And then it becomes that age where everyone starts to say, well, should you do competitive, right? And you start thinking about it, right? Am I giving my kid the right competition? Am I setting them up for success? And, I think that's where that conversation for us really took a turn a couple of years ago. And we sat back and you came to me and said, hey, let's let's go start a travel organization. And my answer off the bat was what?
No, definitely not.
Definitely
no way.
And yeah, I literally was adamant about not doing it. And I think it took probably 3 or 4 more conversations before I even became remotely interested in doing this. And I think my reservations are something that a lot of parents have because, I did play baseball at a pretty high level through college. I know you played football into college. And I think anyone who's played sports at a high level has obviously played some at a very competitive level at some point, right? And for me growing up,
you can't get to those higher levels without learning how to compete.
100%.
Period. I mean, that's any athlete, whatever level they played at, they will tell you that in order to get to those next levels, the colleges and then beyond college, playing pro level sports, they will tell you that you have to learn how to compete at an early age. But that doesn't mean it has to be cutthroat. That doesn't mean it has to be with a coach in your face, pointing and yelling and screaming. And it also doesn't mean it shouldn't be fun. You learn this as you were coming up through baseball. You've got to fall in love with the process. If you don't fall in love with the process, you're not going to stick with it. And when you fall in love with the process, you fall in love with the game, then it all becomes something that you want to chase. You want that dedication. And that's what your true athletes get to. They get to that point to where they have fallen in love with the process, but it starts so much earlier where all you want to do is go play ball. I mean, you were talking about when the kids started at T-ball, and I'm cracking up because I remember at 3 years old, Ethan and Jason and some of the other kids that we've got with us still today, 8 years later, the only thing they wanted to talk about was baseball. That was it. They woke up thinking, I want to play baseball. Anytime you gave them something to go do in terms of pick a toy to play with, I'm sure Jason was the same way Ethan was. Go grab the nearest ball and let's throw the ball. Go get a bat. You might be holding it upside down, but you got a bat in your hand because you want to swing something.
Absolutely. Jason's first word was ball. There. That kid would look at anything round. Ball. I mean, first word, right? So yeah, I mean, it was ingrained. And ironically enough with him, I think because I played baseball, I was adamant that I wasn't going to be that guy who was like, hey, baseball. So I actually pushed the opposite direction, right? He kept wanting to play baseball, and I'm like, oh, go play soccer. And no, that didn't work. Okay, go play this. Go do this. Nah, I don't do, you want to do baseball, great, but you're going to do that. And I actually tried to push him away. And for him, he just gravitated back to baseball. And that was it. But I think, it's interesting because I agree with you. I think the learning to compete is a major life skill, right? And as I said in the beginning, we built this organization around teaching life skills through baseball, but through youth sports, right? And that's really what this podcast is actually meant to enhance and bring the light of how that's done, how that's possible. But I think that was the biggest issue in my mind because up until 13, 14, I played Little League, right? I mean, so that was as competitive as it got for me. And then as I got to the big field, that's really when I was growing up, that's when travel, or what was then known as AAU, really became popular. And it wasn't really, you didn't really do that until you really got to that older age group. And that's when it really started to matter because that's when it kind of separated those that were just kind of doing it for fun to those that really wanted to eventually try and do it at a higher level. And at that point, though, it was cutthroat. It was intense. And because it kind of had to be, right? They were trying to prepare you for that high school coach who might get in your face and yell, or that college coach who, was going to be really strict and hard on you. So they had to kind of prepare you. And that was the kind of teams, those were the coaches you were playing to win. It was pretty cutthroat. And so in the back of my mind, when I kept hearing travel, I just assumed that even in the youth levels, all they had done now was take what we were doing at 13, 14 and started doing it at 7 and 8. right? And so
Exactly.
in my head, there was no option to still create an environment where kids could have fun and be relaxed and just learn the game and still compete, right? Because that's the other thing. You don't want to just throw a kid out there and be like, yeah, let's go play travel, and they get their faces bashed in every day and they lose the love of the game, because no one wants to sit there and lose every game and get killed every single day, right? That's not the goal, and that's
Exactly
not
right.
fun, right? And so in my head, that's what we were facing. And I think there's a lot of parents out there that probably have a similar concept of what competitive sports and competitive baseball specifically is. That it's that, oh, those are for the kids that don't want to have fun, and just like this becomes life. And I think we've kind of proven now that that's not the case, and that's not how it has to be. And we've built an organization that truly does baseball differently. We look at baseball differently, and we've been able to still build successful teams. Now 7 of them starting at 7 and 8 years old. I mean, my team last year had 5-year-old on it.
That's
And
right.
some people look at that and go, oh, that's crazy. There's no reason a 5-year-old's playing competitive baseball. Well, what if that 5-year-old, though, was getting exposed to things that the 10 and 11-year-olds skill wise were getting exposed to, and may not be able to physically do them yet? But now at 7 and 8, because they've been doing them for the last 2 to 3 years, has that concept down and is starting to figure out how to do it at such a young age,
Exactly.
right? And that's where the difference started, where it really started to click for me, as I started to watch our kids compared to those that did just stick with rec baseball. And I started to see the difference when we went back and would scrimmage them or do it. I'm like, wow, our kids just are so far ahead mentally in the game. And to your point, learning to compete,
Yes.
learning, they were gelling together. They were becoming, this was a friendship. This was a bond. It just happened to be happening on a baseball field. And that's really where it clicked for me of like, yeah, we did the right thing. And it's kind of taken off. So, I mean, what was your drive from rec baseball? Because I think your departure, your reasons for departing and mine were slightly different. But what
Oh,
caused you
absolutely.
to come and hassle me over going to travel baseball with you?
So when we were at the park, and it's interesting because I think our stories are somewhat prototypical of what many of the parents that are going to be watching this have experienced already. And some of the parents that are just now at that 2, 3-year-old level and trying to explore and figure this all out, they're going to experience, right? So we started at the park. We did the T-ball routine, give the kids the exposure. A couple of dads volunteering to coach, but really just kind of give them the basics. The kids learned to have fun. They learned to be on a team. They learned that the sport's supposed to be fun, and that's what it was about, right? From there, some of the kids started to develop skill sets. Really, their athleticism started to grow a bit. And as with most parks, our park had an advanced baseball program that was designed to take that rec experience and bring it up a level, competing against other neighborhood parks to help those particular kids really start to develop. And I guess it was the 6 to 7-year-old age when we started getting asked for Ethan to play. And I was tentative about it, but we stepped forward and did it. And the guy that was heading up the program at that time for our age group, he asked me to coach alongside him, and I did that. And it was an interesting experience because, again, it was taking what we were doing, but bringing it up that level. And early on, I enjoyed it. And the kids seemed to be having a good time. And then things continued to develop. That group split in half because the older kids, the 8-year-olds, were moving up to 9U, and 9U for us is when the kids started to do kid pitch. But Ethan was part of that younger group that was still 7, so they still had a whole another season of 8. And the head coach, he went up to 9U. I stayed down at 8, and I wound up becoming the head coach of our AB program. And it was my first opportunity to really start putting this together. But I'm with the park, so I'm listening to what the park leadership is telling me about what they're looking for out of the park. And real quickly, I found out that park leadership was looking for us to compete to win. And there's nothing wrong with that. I am a big fan of winning. I enjoy winning. I really hate losing. So I wanted to win. But what we learned very quickly was the teams that were winning weren't necessarily teaching good baseball. They were teaching the kids how to take advantage of the situation that was presented at that time to create runs and get wins. So we became a very good 8U team in terms of our win-loss record, but maybe not teaching the best baseball. But hey, listen, that's what I was asked to do, and I got caught up in that trying to win thing. And for the next year, I was as much a responsible party to us becoming this winning culture, but maybe not teaching great baseball as anyone. And I hit a point in my life where, as many parents do, where your professional life, what you do for a day job, starts to come into clash with what we're doing on the field as coaches. So I had to take a step back from my coaching in order to make sure I was putting the right effort towards my career. So I stepped away from coaching for a season. And at the end of that season, my son came to me and said, "Dad, I don't want to play baseball anymore. I'm miserable. I hate this game." And that was the eye opener for me. I couldn't understand how a child who at just a few years earlier, all he wanted to do was baseball from the time he woke up to the time he went to sleep, is now sitting here telling me he's done at 8 years old, 9 years old. He's miserable. So I started to work with him and understand what was happening. And I found out quickly that he wasn't enjoying the game anymore because some of the coaches were maybe not treating him the way he wanted to be treated. And his teammates weren't necessarily, he wasn't gelling with all of them because he wanted to continue to grow and develop at different positions. But his teammates wanted him in the side of the bench so that way they had a better shot at winning in certain circumstances. And he was struggling with that. And I think that's a lesson all athletes need to learn at some point in time. The best way to help the team is letting the kid who is going to play better play. But at 8 years old, at 9 years old, I didn't necessarily feel that was the time to start adapting that lesson. So that was when I came to you and said,
I think that's
I'm wondering if there's not a better way to do this.
I think that story is one that a lot of parents can resonate with, because the reality is, you're right. It is an important lesson, and it's one that will and should be learned, but it's not a lesson that needs to be learned in still what is technically a rec baseball environment at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. That's not the time they need to learn that, right? That comes with maturity, because at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, even sometimes at soon to be 36, I still don't understand it, right? So the expectation to put that expectation on a kid to be like, oh, they'll understand. No, they don't. They just understand that they're working hard to play a game that they're supposed to be fun. And it's not fun sitting on the bench and doing this all the time, right? And I think the important lesson here is you listen to your kid, which is a valuable lesson for everyone to take away, because I think we do get caught up sometimes, and we get caught up in how it was when we played or when we were kids or whatever else. And we stop listening to the kid. And when you have a kid, because I know yours very well, when he in particular comes and says, I don't want to play baseball anymore, who's a kid that we're going to do a podcast. So once a month, we're going to have one of the players on. He's going to be the first episode we do, and I can't wait for it. But you will see after that episode that he is a kid that if I said, dude, I will give you $5 if you tattoo a baseball like right here on your chest, he'd be like, let's do it. Right. So he lives and breathes this game. So for him to come and say, I don't want to play baseball anymore, is ridiculous, right? And that just tells you that this environment has completely ruined a game at 7 years old. And I think that's the fear that a lot of parents have about travel. Oh, I'm gonna push them too hard. I'm gonna put them in too competitive an environment, and they're gonna end up hating it, and it's gonna be too much pressure, and they're going to not want to do it anymore. And it's easy to fall trapped to that. And
it's so simple, man. I love to win just like you do. And exactly. You're trying to do all these things. And it was interesting because when I started first thinking, man, there's a better way to do this. As you know, as many parents out there know, when you start talking about leaving the park that you're with, you quickly become a pariah at the park, right? You're persona non grata real quick because you're supposed to be dedicated to the park and it's all about their business. And if you're walking away, well, that's fine. You could go, but don't think of taking anybody else with you. And the reason you're wanting to leave, and I was told this by people who at one point in time, I would have called friends. These are folks telling me, well, you're just trying to do something different because your kid's not good enough to hack it. Your kid's not good enough to hack it. Well, at 9 years old, 8 years old, I don't know whether or not my son is going to grow into someone your size who's 6'3", 6'4", and a very good athlete, or will he stay small like he is now? I mean, genetically, he's probably going to be a bit smaller, but that's okay. At the end of the day, he hasn't fully developed who he's going to be physically. He hasn't fully developed who he's going to be as a ball player. And all at the same time, I'm, as a parent, under no illusions that I'm sitting here raising the next Mike Trout. I don't look at this as an opportunity for me to get the successes that I didn't have on the field as a player, and I'm going to live those successes vicariously through my son. This is about him and his experience and what he's going to take with him as he goes forward.
Yep.
And in the circumstance where I'm not raising the next Mike Trout, I'm still raising a young man who one day is going to leave our house and be part of that next generation making waves in the world. And I prefer for him to have a skill set, regardless of what that way in the world is going to be, as an athlete or as a banker or as an engineer or whatever he chooses to do with his life. I want him to have the skill set he's going to need to deal with all of the challenges that are going to come his way. Every parent that's sitting here watching us deals with challenges on a day-to-day basis at work, with your family, with your friends, your relationships, everything. It's all a challenge. Being an adult is hard work. We're all struggling in different ways. The reason that some of us are way more successful at this adulting thing than others is because we've got a skill set that allows for us to be adaptable, to be resilient, to have those interpersonal skills to deal with people above us in the ladder, below us in the ladder, peer level in the ladder, whatever that might be. We've developed our successes based on those skill sets. So I want to make sure that my son, even if he is the next Mike Trout, has those skill sets to be successful at whatever he did, whatever he's going to do. So when I started talking to you about, hey, maybe we should look at doing this thing, it was because I saw what he was getting out of his experience at the park, and it wasn't going to serve him well in the future. And when we started looking at travel, I went out there and I had my son try out for a bunch of different teams, right? And some of those teams, they told us Ethan's not good enough to play here. And that's fine. That's true. Ethan wasn't good enough to play on that particular team because, like you said, there are still teams out there who are on that ultra competitive level. They are only looking for the best of the best. And you've got to perform and continue to perform at that level to stay on that team. And there's nothing wrong with those teams.
Nope.
I think it's great. It fills a niche that some people are looking for.
Sure.
There were other teams, though, that wanted him, but I felt a lot of what I was seeing out of the coaches was more of the same as what I saw out at the park. It wasn't the right fit. So that's why I said, Mike, man, I think we can do this a little bit differently. I think we've got something that we can offer that will fill a niche that's not currently being met.
And I will say this. I wish my eventual come around was due to a very noble cause. I think my initial reason why I said yes was actually the fact that I look back at it and I had my second one starting to play, and he was getting to a point where they were about to get to a fairly competitive level and doing all-stars and AB, and that was going to be coming. And I'm looking at that saying, okay, so if I want to expose my kids to the more competitive environment, and this is not a knock on our local park in particular. This is how 99% of local parks are run. And it's just by nature of how they have to be kind of run because they're community parks. But in most rec parks, your child has to play rec baseball. And if they want to play competitive, then they also play competitive. And so at our park at that time, what that meant was that was 2 practices during the week for a regular practice and a hitting practice for your rec team, a game during the week for the rec, and then a game on weekends. So when I started looking at that, I said, well, I've got 2 and I coach both. So now I've got double that, right? And then if I want AB on top of it, that was on Sundays. So I started looking at this and saying, okay, so basically during the season, I'm 6 nights a week here for 3-4 hours at a time. That's a lot, right? Not just on them, on me, my wife, like that's a lot on our family. And I don't know if that's going to make sense. And so I started looking at the travel thing. And at first I'm like, no. And then I'm like, wait a minute. So you're telling me I get to control the schedule. We get to coordinate it out. I can really probably cut that 6 days down to 3 or 4 days. And then I'm only playing every other weekend or whenever we want to play instead of having to play. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Interesting. Okay. And then we started doing the costs, and in my head, like many parents, a travel ball's expensive. You're driving all over the place. And we started going through it and we're like, no, actually we can play 30 minutes away. And that's where most of our tournaments are. We can travel when we want. And the cost is this. And when we ran it out, it was actually cheaper than doing rec, AB, all-stars, and all that combined was far more expensive than our full season of travel. And so I'm sitting back going, well, wait a minute, math. It's cheaper. I get to control the schedule. So that was really what prompted me to say yes. And then shortly after getting into it, and I added, so that season we just went with the one team with our older ones. And then that next season we added my younger son's team, the younger age group. And then now, here we are 2 seasons later with 7 teams headed into the spring season. But the one thing I learned or realized very quickly on, which was a little bit more noble to your point, was we can do something that, despite all the great coaching I had, and my dad coached me growing up, and to this day, one of my best friends and still probably the greatest coach I ever had, it wasn't talked about what sports was actually doing for us. And he talked to me all the time about, hey, this isn't, I know you want to play professional sports. The likelihood of that happening, though, is very small. And so he pushed education. He pushed college for that reason. He pushed those things. So he did that. But what wasn't had at the conversation that we're having with our 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds is that conversation of, guys, baseball is literally the greatest life lesson you can have. And when I look back now, and now I look at my professional career and say, you know what? I deal with failure extremely well. I can deal with pressure. I can deal with change extremely well. I can deal with almost anything that's thrown at me. I'm not going to get overwhelmed. I stay calm in those situations. I'm able to make decisions. I'm able to think quickly. I'm able to create strategy. Those skill sets were honed far more on the baseball field than they ever were in any classroom that I sat in through college. Right.
Oh, of course. I mean, think about it.
But I didn't realize that. Skills. Right. I didn't really think about it until I got older and was like, wow.
Right.
Like sports had a huge impact on me, like on my ability. right? Because no one talked
so
about it.
funny to me because exactly what you're saying, right? We weren't taught that in school. In school, the closest thing we were taught to being a good teammate is when you got a group work project. And I'm guessing your experience was similar to mine. Group work project, it was always the same thing. You had your four kids. One of them was going to do 90% of the work. One of them was going to do absolutely nothing. And the other two were going to do what they were asked to do, but not volunteer to do anything more, right? That's how it always worked.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I learned, and I didn't realize this until I had come out of college. I was running my own business, and I had associates coming to me, people that were working for me, relying on me for a paycheck, who had a tough experience with their personal life and their professional life kind of colliding. It was creating friction for them. And I had to learn how to lift those people up and help them through and take on some of the things that they couldn't handle at that moment, but also let them know that I still believed in them. And those skills are the same exact skills that we learned on the ball fields, on the gridiron, when you're playing and you have that teammate that's just struggling, right? You got the guy standing across from you who all of a sudden can't catch, or all of a sudden can't find the strike zone. All of a sudden goes through a hitting slump, and he feels like everything that he's doing is just coming out failure, failure, failure. As a teammate, we've got to learn how to say, come on, we got this. We're going to work through this and we're going to succeed, and help them come out the other side stronger. And those are the exact same skills you're going to use in an office setting today. 100%. So that's why we wanted to be able to do that for these kids, give them those lessons.
And make sure that, and the difference I think that we're doing, which I'm excited to see how this plays out in the future, is we're explaining it to them, right? We're actually telling them, hey, and it's not that it clicks, right? Especially in the heat of the moment, kid strikes out, he's still going to be pissed. He's still going to want to throw his bat in his helmet, and, he's mad at the world. And heck, we've experienced it with our 11U team. They're starting to get to that age where emotions are all over the place. Some cry, some want to cuss, some want to throw. I mean, it's crazy, right? We're dealing with kids. So the emotions are all over the place, and that's to be expected. But I think the important thing is, and I'm doing this even all the way down to our 8U team, is reminding them every time that happens, yes, but the next time you step up, you're stronger, right? The next time you make a mistake, be accountable. The next time you do this, because it's not about the mistake. It's not about the strikeout. It's not about the error. It's not about the 4 walks. It's not about that. It's about the fact that you got back up and you threw another pitch. You took another swing. You made the next play. That's where the growth happens. And I think we learned that through sports, but no one was explaining it. And the fact of the matter is, now that they are thinking about that and they know that, and we're giving them words and things to think about, like last year was accountability. This year we're focusing on on adaptability, the ability to adapt to different. We're teaching them concepts, and we're emphasizing that that's actually what we're working on, right? So this is beyond baseball at this point. We're just going to teach that life skill through the game. And I think the fact that we're emphasizing that is something I never had as a kid. And I think that's going to set them up in a really good spot, as they continue to develop. And, if at the end of the day, if the kids get to high school and want to keep playing, great. If they get to college, those that are lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to get there, great. If they happen to end up earning that draft spot, that's awesome. But, I think we all know the math on that is extremely slim, right? And so,
yeah, absolutely. That's a lottery.
Not what this is about.
No. I mean, I'll tell you, as a coach and as an owner of an organization like this, the thing that I got the most joy out of recently isn't a win that we had. It's not a loss. It's not even really an experience in a game per se. When we did this and we started giving them a word for the season, and we were trying to tie all of those lessons back to that word. Our first word, like you pointed out, was accountability, right? And how many of the parents out there that are watching this now are sitting there and their child is being a child, does something silly, but then won't take any accountability for their own action? They're sitting there pointing at, oh, well, this happened because of this guy, or this happened. Oh, I got in trouble at school because my teacher did this. Not because of what I did, but because my teacher did this.
The ref made a bad call. The umpire blew that
Exactly.
one.
The thing that makes me the most proud now is when we're sitting here and we're in a game situation or even in a practice situation, and we hit a ground ball to a kid who knows he should be able to handle that ground ball, but muffs it. It happens. That's called an error, right? It wasn't on purpose. He made a mistake. The thing that makes me the most proud is when they turn around and look at their teammates and say, my bad. Sorry, guys. That's on me. Because that's something that just a year ago, some of those kids, the words would have never left their mouth. My bad. It was always, oh, well, that ball was hit too hard. Or I tripped over the shoelace that you left there, or whatever excuse they can come up with. Who are they going to blame? So those are those lessons that we're trying to deliver. And when they're taking those lessons and using them in those game situations, in those practice situations, or in their situations at home, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
it really is. It's showing that what we're doing it well, and we're doing it for all the right reasons.
And, I think that comes back to the mentality of no excuses. And I think people say that a lot, but the reality is when you have a 10-year-old who starts to give you an excuse, and all I have to say is, what's that? What does that sound like? And all of a sudden he'll go, yeah, that's an excuse. And he knows, right? And it's like, okay, as long as you can catch yourself, right? Because we all do it. We're all going to complain. We're all going to blame something on somebody else because accountability sucks, right? When stuff, it's hard at times. But here's what I try and I'm still learning this at 36, but I try and remind both my kids on a regular basis, and we try and teach our teams this, is at the end of the day, I actually have learned to love accountability, and I want everything to be my fault, because through that means that I have control. If something is my fault, it means I have control and the power to fix it. When things are out of my control, when there are things I can't fix, that's a problem, because that there's nothing I can do about that. But if something's my fault, that means I can fix it. And if I can fix it, then I'm in a good position, right? And so it's actually learning to love that responsibility, but it's hard, and that's a hard concept. And this is not something that our kids are perfect at, our teams are perfect at, I'm perfect at. No one's perfect at this. But I think the fact of the matter is we are, as coaches, as parents, as dads, we're trying to emphasize this mindset and these skills into our players and into our own kids. And I think it's showing. And now, we've added 5 teams more. And so we've got 7 teams in total, ranging from 7 years old all the way up to 11U. And there's more coming. And it's not, this isn't a moneymaker for us. We're not sitting back going, hey, yes, we've got some sweet gear that we bought. I did get this sweet mug though from one of my parents. So I got to give them a shout out, because this is like the coolest gift of all time. So the McAllisters, if you're watching, thank you. And shout out to Dugout Mugs. If you like this is actually made from a baseball bat. So it's really sweet. So we get some sweet stuff, but we're not doing this for the money, right? We're not like these big travel organizations that are charging $1,000 team fees and all this other stuff on top of the dues. That's not what this is about, and I think we're probably one of the cheapest organizations to join out there. This is strictly about creating a really unique perspective on how to actually be able to create teams that compete. And that's the biggest thing. And I think this is what we can wrap up on. The biggest thing I think we've accomplished and proven, which I wasn't sure was possible. I'm going to be honest. I didn't know if we could do what we were trying to do and not go get our faces bashed in. And those first few tournaments, if you would have asked me after those, I would have been like, yeah, I was right. We can't. We're going to get bashed every weekend. But we kept working at it. We kept coming back. We kept doing, the kids kept working hard. And then it slowly started to take off, where it realized that we could do both. We could have this development focus, learn the game, learn life skills, but also still compete. And the difference is, and this is the thing, there are other organizations out there that are doing this very well as well. There are a lot of organizations that we've run into that claim they are development first, and they are not, right? When it actually comes down to it, they are most of the time. When it's convenient to be development first, they are development first. But when they are in the championship game and they need 6 outs, and little Timmy has thrown all weekend and is already 137 pitches deep, they're going to put little Timmy back in the game to finish it out because legally they can, and he gives them their best chance to win that 9U, 10U, 11U, 12U championship game. And for me, any coach who's willing to do that, even in that one little moment, you are not development focused. I don't care if you've spent all week working on developing your players. If you are willing to do that one time on a weekend, you are not development first. And so for us, that's the biggest difference. We've literally drawn a line in the sand and said, no, we are not going to demonize winning. We like to win. Winning is not a bad thing. And I think that's the flip side of this, right? Is a lot of teams that do go this way get demonized. Oh, they demonize winning. They make winning seem like it's just, but no, winning's great. We love to win, right? I love to win. I'm one of the most competitive people you will ever meet. I just don't want to win at all costs. And I'm never going to win if that means that I've got to sacrifice the development of a player emotionally or physically. That is not worth it to me ever. So that's the line we've drawn in the sand. And I think because of that, that truly is what separates what we're doing. And that is an organizational wide philosophy. We do not dictate rosters. We don't control our coaches in any way outside of that one rule. Like, never, ever let us see that you threw a kid 120 pitches in a weekend. Never, ever let us hear that you're benching a kid all weekend long just because you want to go win. That is not going to happen with this logo on your jersey. Not going to happen.
No.
Right? And I think that's the difference.
And I'll tell you something, Mike, because you hit it on the head. When we talk about development, and we said this, we did a coaches clinic recently where all of the organization got together, all of the coaches throughout the organization, and we got together to exchange ideas and thoughts and philosophies. And we were provided guidance by a top-notch D1 baseball program, their coaching staff. They stepped in to help give us that guidance. And through those discussions that we were all having, we talked about the idea of being this development first organization. And one of the things that we talk about, other organizations will call themselves development, and they use that term, they've co-opted even to mean, oh, we're not very good. We really want to be this ultra competitive team that goes out and chases trophies. But right now, our kids just aren't very good. So we'll call this level, this team, a development team. When we talk about development, that's not at all what we're talking about. We believe you can develop and win simultaneously. But to your point, the idea is, are you really developing the skill sets necessary to be successful? Or when the pressure's on, are you reverting to whatever it's going to take to win? When we talk about development, I always look at it and say, it's great. You may be a development organization, but are you developing all of the kids in your organization? Or are you just developing the 3 or 4 or 5 studs at the top of your roster? It's easy as a coach to spend time with that kid who's got all of the athletic talent in the world, all of the dedication, all of the focus, and really wants to take it somewhere. You want to put as much time into that child as you can. And you think because you're doing that, you're a development first coach. What I want to see is, what about the kid sitting on your bench at number 11 or 12, the last one on that roster? Are you spending as much time with him? Are you focused on him and trying to get him what he needs in order to take his next step? Because if you look at our roster, I like to tell everybody that's asked, don't judge us by our wins and losses. Judge us by how far we've come as a team. And when we come as a team, I'm talking about take a look at that kid sitting there on my roster at 9, 10, 11 in terms of skill set. Where has he started from and where is he at right now? Because we spend our practice time and we talk about specialization and how many organizations out there, even at 9, 10, and 11 years old, are taking these kids and saying, hey, right now you're built like a middle infielder, so we're going to play you at shortstop and second base, and you're going to get 100% of your reps there. And they're going to get really good at short and second. But let's hope that between now and the time that he's 16, he doesn't hit a growth spurt and wind up becoming 6'3", 215. Now, shortstop and second base may not be his best spot, right? And if he doesn't understand the game from all these other positions, that's a big gap. So we take our kids, and at every practice, they get experience playing almost every single position. When we play some of these teams that call themselves development first organizations, and we see the same kid pitch game 1, game 2, game 3, or we play them 4 different weekends and they go through the same 6 kid rotation, I wonder, are you really developing? Because at 9, 10, 11 years old, how do you know how good of a pitcher this child can be? You don't know that. You don't. You got to get them out on the mound. You got to give them the experience of pitching to another hitter in a game. He needs to understand, what does it feel like to walk 4 bases loaded? You came in with 2 outs, nobody on. All you had to do is get that last out, and you walked. And then you walked the next one. And then you walked the next one. And now all of a sudden you're sitting here, bases loaded, 2 outs, and you've just walked 3, and that's in your head. That's a development opportunity. So if you turn around as a coach and pull that kid right away, bring in the next kid in the rotation just so you can get out of the inning and get the win, you've deprived that child that you're pulling the opportunity to learn how to work through that adversity. That's not a development organization. And when we talk about being a development organization, we're talking about giving the child the opportunity to have that experience, to learn that skill set, to practice that skill set in what essentially amounts to be a zero cost environment. I don't want my son to have to learn that skill set when he's got a job on the line, or his career is on the line, or a relationship is on the line. I want him to learn it when there's a $5 trophy sitting there on the line, because that's something that's an experience that he will remember, he will learn from, he will build from, but it's not going to harm him long term.
No. And we're development first physically, and this mental side is the other development side. And I think that is the one that is most often overlooked on the youth side. And it's why you see so many guys with so much talent get to college and flunk out, get to the pros and they can't make it, get here and they just they're not mentally strong. Right. And a lot of times your better athletes are those guys. Why? Because when they were 14, 15, 16, 17, and they threw 95 and no one else could hit it, they didn't face much adversity. Then they got to college and all of a sudden everyone could hit, or they got to the pros and that wasn't anything. And they were the 4th, 5th guy on the roster, not the first one. And now all of a sudden they don't know how to deal with that. And so then they start drinking, then they start doing other stuff. And next thing you know, their grades are, and next thing you know, they're not even playing the game anymore that they were the best at for most of their life. And that happens to be a lot of times on the better players. But we're not spending a lot of time, typically as coaches, especially youth coaches, working on that. And how do I know that? Because I lived it, right? I played against those guys. I played with those guys. I've seen them. I grew up with them. I had friends get drafted that weren't mentally capable of handling not being the best player on the team, right? Absolutely. And I went through that a little bit as a player because I was ahead of most kids until I wasn't. And then I was like, oh, shit, all right, well, what now, right? And luckily, I did have a dad and a brother that really had helped me mentally prepare more than most. And I was able to adapt and handle it. But I think that's the biggest thing. And I know it to be true still to this day, because One of our coaches, the head baseball coach at USF, right? He's involved in our organization, and he tells us all the time, dude, you guys would be shocked at some of the stuff I come, right? It's not the talent that's the issue. It's the mental side of it that's the issue, right? And baseball in particular is such a mental game, but this is really just any kid playing any sport, and you'll see it, you'll see it in school, you'll see it here. So that is the important thing. And whether it's us or coach, if you're a coach and you're watching this, which I hope you are, you're a parent, these are the things that I hope you'll start to take away from episodes like this. And we're going to have more amazing episodes. We're going to bring on some amazing guests. Like I said, D1 coaches, just elite level, high level athletes, high level coaches, and other parents who've gone through this, have more experience than I do, than everyone else. And so we're going to bring them on, let them give us their perspective. My wife is an expert in child development, emotional intelligence, and teaching that to kids. We're going to have her on because I think there's a lot that I still try and learn from her. And I think there's a lot that as coaches and parents, we can take away from that skill set and apply that to what we do on the field. So we have so much exciting stuff in the pipeline. I hope you got something out of this episode, and kind of our origin story and why we started and why we're starting this podcast, because that truly is what this is all about. This is going to be a podcast dedicated to just developing our kids, our players, and developing as coaches and as leaders and as parents. And so that's kind of the goal of the podcast. I hope you got something out of this one, and we will be back every single week with a new guest, new episode, new topics. So stay tuned. If you liked it, hit that subscribe button, like it, leave us a comment. Let us know what you want to hear next time. We'll make sure we include that. And until then, Eric, always a pleasure, my man. I will see you tomorrow night at practice.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. And hope everybody out there got something out of this. This is going to be an awesome ride. I'm looking forward to it, man.
It really is. All right, guys. Till next time. See ya.
Take care.